I stood alone at the end of the aisle, my wedding dress catching the afternoon light filtering through the vineyard's ancient oaks. The ivory silk felt heavy against my skin, but not as heavy as my phone clutched in my left hand. I had just hung up with my mother, Victoria. Her voice still echoed in my head, cold and matter-of-fact, as if she were declining a dinner invitation rather than her only daughter's wedding. "Marcus has an important networking event," she had said. "Your father and I won't be able to make it. You understand?" I understood perfectly. I had understood for 28 years. I understood when they missed my high school graduation because Marcus had a basketball tournament. I understood when they skipped my college scholarship ceremony because Marcus needed help moving into his new apartment. I understood when they were absent from my company launch because Marcus and Tiffany were announcing their pregnancy. I understood everything except why I kept hoping things would change. The chairs in the front row sat empty, 3 vacant seats that spoke louder than any congratulations ever could. I felt Daniel's eyes on me from the altar, his expression a mixture of concern and barely contained rage. He had begged me not to call them, not to give them another opportunity to disappoint me. But some desperate part of me had needed to try one more time, to extend one final olive branch before I walked into my new life. That part of me died as I took my first step down the aisle. The ceremony was beautiful in ways I had not expected. Sophia, my best friend and creative director, read a poem about chosen family that made half the guests cry. Daniel's vows were so genuine, so full of the kind of love I had spent my whole life craving from people who shared my DNA, that I found myself believing that maybe blood did not matter as much as I had always thought it did. Eleanor Albright, the investor who had believed in my vision when everyone else called me naive, stood and raised her glass during the reception, her weathered face radiant with pride. "To Charlotte," she said, her voice carrying across the intimate gathering of 50 people who had chosen to be there. "A woman who built an empire with nothing but talent, determination, and the courage to bet on herself when no one else would." The applause was thunderous. I smiled and thanked everyone, but my eyes kept drifting to my phone on the gift table, its screen dark and silent. No missed calls, no texts, nothing. Later that evening, after the last guest had left, and the caterers had packed away the final traces of the celebration, I found myself standing in the vineyard garden, still in my wedding dress, staring at the empty darkness beyond the property line. Daniel found me there, his jacket draped over his arm, his bow tie undone. "You okay?" he asked, though we both knew the answer. "They chose not to be here," I said quietly. "This was not an emergency. This was not a conflict. They just decided that a networking event was more important than watching me get married." Daniel stepped closer, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I could feel his heart beating against my back, steady and sure in a way nothing else in my life had ever been. "Their loss," he whispered into my hair. "You're the best thing that ever happened to this family, and they're too blind to see it." I leaned back into him, letting his warmth seep into the cold places inside me. Something shifted in that moment. Something fundamental and irreversible. I had spent my entire life trying to be good enough, trying to prove I deserved their attention, their approval, their love. I had excelled in school, built a successful career, stayed kind and generous despite their indifference. And still, it was never enough. But standing there in Daniel's arms, looking at the vineyard where 50 people had celebrated with us, where Eleanor had toasted to my success, where Sophia had cried happy tears, I realized something crucial. The problem was not that I was not enough. The problem was that they had decided long ago that nothing I did would ever matter as much as what Marcus did. And I was done trying to change their minds. 2 years later, I stood in my corner office in downtown New York, 37 floors above the street, watching the sun set over the Hudson River. The city sparkled below me like a galaxy of possibilities, My assistant had just left, having delivered the final paperwork for the Blackwood Studios acquisition. $50 million. The deal had closed an hour ago, and already my phone was buzzing with congratulatory messages from colleagues, competitors, and the press. Sophia burst through the door with the rest of my team, champagne bottles in hand and grins splitting their faces. They popped the cork and filled glasses, toasting to the biggest acquisition in our company's 5-year history. I smiled and clinked glasses, playing the part of the triumphant CEO, but my attention kept sliding to my personal phone on the desk. I had posted a photo to Instagram that morning, a casual shot of the contract signing with a caption about dreams becoming reality. Within minutes, the tech press had picked it up. Within hours, it was trending in business circles. And within those same hours, my family's social media had lit up with activity for the first time in months. Marcus had posted a family photo from some resort in Turks and Caicos. The whole gang was there, Victoria and Robert flanking Marcus and Tiffany, their twin boys grinning in matching polo shirts. The caption read, "Family traditions continue. Third generation heading to Westridge Academy." I was not in the photo. I had not been invited to whatever gathering this was. I had not even known they were planning a trip. "Charlotte?" Sophia touched my arm gently. "You good? We lost you for a second there." I locked my phone and set it face down on the desk, forcing my smile wider. "I'm great. Sorry, just thinking about the next steps for integration." But I was not thinking about business integration. I was thinking about how my family had not called when I sold my first startup for $8 million. They had not reached out when Forbes featured me in their 30 under 30 list. They had not acknowledged the wedding announcement I had sent them, or the Christmas cards I had mailed for 2 years running, or the thoughtful birthday gifts I had continued sending despite never receiving so much as a thank you text. That night, after the team had left and Daniel and I were back in our Brooklyn brownstone, I did something I had been avoiding for months. I hired a private investigator to look into my family's finances, not because I wanted to gloat over any struggles they might be having, but because I needed to understand the full picture before they inevitably came calling. The report arrived 3 days later, and it was worse than I had imagined. Marcus had not worked a real job in 4 years. He and Tiffany were living entirely off Robert and Victoria's money, which was rapidly running out. They had taken out a second mortgage on the family home. Marcus was 3 months behind on payments for his Westchester house. The twins' tuition at their private school was overdue, and apparently, Victoria had been making cryptic comments on social media about family values and supporting your own blood. I knew what was coming. I just did not know when. The answer came on a Tuesday morning in early October. I had just signed the papers for a Porsche 911 Turbo S, a sleek silver beast that cost more than my parents' annual income. It was an indulgence, sure, but also a symbol. For years, I had been frugal, saving every penny. Afraid to spend money on myself, because some small voice in my head kept whispering that I did not deserve it. That voice sounded suspiciously like Victoria, but I did deserve it. I had built 2 companies from nothing. I had earned every dollar through long nights, risky decisions, and sheer determination. And I was going to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I took a photo of the car parked in front of our brownstone, the autumn light making the paint shimmer like liquid mercury. Posted it to Instagram with a simple caption, "Dreams to reality." Within 72 hours, my phone rang with a number I had not seen on my screen in 5 years. Victoria Vance. Calling me directly for the first time since the week before my wedding, when she had asked if I could change the date to accommodate Marcus's schedule. I let it ring 3 times before answering. Each ring a small act of rebellion. "Hello, Victoria," I said, using her first name deliberately. Not Mom. Not Mother. Just Victoria, as if she were a business acquaintance. "Charlotte." Her voice had that particular quality, that I remembered from childhood. That blend of authority and barely concealed impatience. We need to talk. Family meeting tomorrow. I heard Robert in the background, his voice gruff. Tell her it's important. A family meeting? I repeated slowly, letting the words hang in the air. After 5 years of silence? My wedding wasn't important enough for a phone call. But now we need a family meeting? There was a pause, and I could almost see Victoria's face, that pinched expression she got when she was caught off guard. Charlotte, don't be difficult. This is about financial matters. Complex financial matters. We need to discuss this as a family. I felt something cold and sharp crystallize in my chest. They had seen the car. They had seen the acquisition news. And suddenly, after years of treating me like an afterthought, I was important enough for a family meeting. What time? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. 2:00. At the house. I'll be there, I said, and hung up before she could say anything else. Daniel found me sitting on the couch, staring at my phone like it might explode. He sat down beside me, waiting patiently for me to speak. After 12 years together, he knew when to push and when to just be present. They want money, I finally said. Victoria called. Family meeting tomorrow. Are you going to go? I looked up at him, this man who had stood by me through everything, who had never once made me feel like I was too much or not enough. Yes. But not because they asked. Because I need to say some things that I should have said years ago. The next day, I drove the Porsche to my childhood home in Connecticut. The house looked smaller than I remembered. The paint a little more faded. The garden a little more overgrown. I parked in the circular driveway, the car's presence almost obscene against the backdrop of middle-class suburban decay. I sat in the driver's seat for a full 5 minutes, my hands on the steering wheel, breathing deeply. My phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. Remember who you are. Call me if you need a rescue. I smiled at that and typed back. Boundaries aren't punishment. They're protection. Then I got out of the car and walked to the front door. The dining room was exactly as I remembered it. Dark wood furniture that Victoria had inherited from her mother, faded floral wallpaper that should have been replaced a decade ago, and the heavy chandelier that always made the room feel like a funeral parlor. Robert sat at the head of the table, Marcus to his right, Tiffany beside him looking uncomfortable. Victoria stood by the credenza, arranging teacups with shaking hands. No one stood up when I entered. No one said congratulations on the acquisition. No one mentioned the wedding anniversary that had passed last month. Let's get to the point, Robert said as soon as I sat down. He pushed a manila folder across the table toward me. Marcus is 3 months behind on his mortgage. The twins' tuition is past due. We're in a difficult position. I did not touch the folder. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my posture straight, my face expressionless. Before we discuss whatever is in that folder, I need to know something. Why am I suddenly important enough to be included in family discussions? Victoria made a small, impatient sound. Charlotte, we don't have time for dramatics. I turned to look at her. Really look at her. Perhaps for the first time as an adult seeing another adult rather than a child seeing a parent. She looked older than her 62 years, tired and worn in a way that money troubles alone could not explain. This isn't dramatics, I said quietly. This is a genuine question. You missed my high school graduation. You missed my college scholarship ceremony. You missed my company launch. You missed my wedding. You have not called me on my birthday in 7 years. You have not responded to a single Christmas card, a single invitation, a single attempt I've made to stay connected. And now, after 5 years of complete silence, you want to have a family meeting. So, I'll ask again, why am I suddenly important? Because you're family, Victoria said. But her voice wavered. Marcus slammed his hand on the table, making Tiffany jump. Jesus Christ, Charlotte. Do you always have to make everything about you? Always showing off how smart you are, how creative, how successful. Robert put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, a gesture so familiar it made my stomach turn. Your brother has a lot of potential. We've had to nurture that. You were always so independent, so determined to do everything yourself. Independent, I repeated. I looked at each of them in turn. Let me correct that narrative, because I've let it stand for too long. I wasn't independent by choice. I was independent by necessity. You missed my 8th grade art show because Marcus had soccer practice. You forgot to pick me up from the airport when I came home from my first semester of college because Marcus needed help with his resume. You skipped my thesis defense because Marcus and Tiffany were announcing their engagement. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. With each milestone I named, I struck my finger against the table for emphasis. You missed my life. Every single important moment, you chose something else. You chose someone else. And now you want to share in what that life has built? Now you want to be family? Victoria started crying, big theatrical tears that she dabbed at with a napkin. We're still your parents, Charlotte. That has to mean something. I looked at her crying face and felt nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness where guilt should have been. It means you have legal rights. It means we share DNA. But it doesn't mean you get to show up now and claim a relationship you never bothered to build. My phone buzzed in my purse. A text from Eleanor. Your worth isn't measured by people who refuse to see your light. I felt something warm spread through my chest. Something that felt a lot like validation. I pulled a document from my bag and placed it on the table. Instead of opening my purse to help them, I had brought this instead. Robert reached for it immediately, his face lighting up with hope. But as he read the first page, his expression crumbled. What is this? That is the announcement for the Eleanor Albright Media Scholarship Fund, I said calmly. $30 million to create opportunities for young women in digital media arts. The press release goes out tomorrow morning. Marcus choked on air. 30 million? To strangers? To young women who need someone to believe in them, I corrected. To girls who won't get the encouragement I never had. To artists and creators who deserve to be seen and supported. I smoothed the paper with my palm. It's named after Eleanor Albright, the woman who invested in my first company when I was 23 and terrified. The woman who saw something in me that my own family refused to acknowledge. The amount is protected in a legal trust. The board approved the allocation last week. It's done. You can't do this. Marcus was on his feet now, his face red. That's our money. That's family money. It's my money, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly quiet. Money I earned. Money I built. Money that exists because I worked 80-hour weeks while you were living off Mom and Dad's retirement fund. I pulled out my phone and opened the voice recorder app, making sure they could all see the screen. I've also been recording this conversation. Every guilt trip, every demand, every manipulative comment. Just in case anyone decides to get creative with legal claims against the foundation. I turned to leave, but Marcus grabbed my arm. You can't just walk away. We need that money. I looked down at his hand on my arm, then back up at his face. No, Marcus. What you need is to show up. At my graduation. At my company launch. At my wedding. But that opportunity has passed. I pulled my arm free and walked toward the door. Behind me, I heard Victoria sobbing, Robert trying to reason with me, Marcus shouting something about betrayal. But their voices faded as I crossed the threshold and closed the door behind me with a soft, final click. The Porsche roared to life with a satisfying growl. I pulled out of the driveway and did not look in the rearview mirror. The following weeks were chaos. Victoria called 17 times. Robert sent a dozen emails about moral obligations and family responsibility. Marcus tried to get a local newspaper to run a story about family disputes, but the reporter was sharper than he expected and started asking why none of them had attended my wedding. The story that ran painted a very different picture than Marcus intended, one about absent parents who suddenly cared when money appeared. I ignored every call, deleted every email, and issued a simple statement through my lawyer. All communication regarding the Vance family should be directed to my legal counsel. Meanwhile, the scholarship fund launched to overwhelming support. The press loved the story of a successful entrepreneur giving back. Eleanor stood beside me at the announcement, her hand warm on my shoulder, her pride evident in every word she spoke. Sophia and the team managed the influx of media requests with practiced efficiency. And Daniel, wonderful Daniel, simply held my hand through all of it and reminded me that boundaries were not cruelty. They were self-preservation. The real cherry on top came 3 months later. I was invited to receive a Business Leadership Award from the Women in Media Alliance. The ceremony was held at a prestigious arts center in Manhattan, and the room was packed with industry leaders, journalists, and young women who looked at me like I represented possibility. Daniel sat in the front row, his eyes shining with pride. Eleanor sat beside him. Sophia was there with her wife. My entire team had bought tickets. There were no empty seats, no gaps, no absences that screamed louder than presence. I stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of faces, and felt something I had never quite felt before: complete. This journey began with invisibility and led to impact, I said, my voice steady and strong. For years, I measured my worth by approval I couldn't earn from people who refused to give it. Now I measure it by what we build together. By the lives we change. By the doors we open for others who were told they weren't good enough. The applause was thunderous. After the ceremony, I made my way through the crowd, accepting congratulations and exchanging business cards. Near the back of the hall, I spotted Lena Chen, the first scholarship recipient, talking excitedly with a group of other young women. When she saw me, her face lit up and she rushed over, nearly knocking me down with the force of her hug. "You're the reason I believed I could do this," she said, tears streaming down her face. "You saw me when no one else did." I hugged her back, feeling the weight of her words settle somewhere deep in my chest. "That's what family does," I whispered. "Real family." My phone buzzed later that evening with a local news alert. Marcus Vance declares bankruptcy, loses family home. There was a photo of him and Tiffany loading boxes into a U-Haul, looking haggard and defeated. The article mentioned his failed business ventures and compared them unfavorably to his sister's transparent, successful charitable foundation. I felt a small, satisfied smile curve my lips. Daniel saw it and raised an eyebrow. Feeling vindicated? I thought about it for a moment, really examined my feelings. I was not happy that Marcus was suffering, but I was content that the truth was visible, that the contrast between their entitled demands and my earned success was now public record. "Justice," I said finally. "It feels like justice." 3 months after that, I agreed to meet Robert and Victoria at a neutral location, a upscale cafe in Midtown. They were already seated when I arrived, and the change in them was striking. They looked older, diminished somehow, like plants that had been slowly dying from lack of water. Robert spoke first, his voice rough. "We should have been there. At your wedding." I sat down across from them, my back straight, my expression neutral, and at my graduation, and at my scholarship ceremony, and at every other milestone you chose to skip. Victoria's hands shook as she reached for her coffee cup. "How do we fix this?" I took a sip of my tea, considering. Some things can't be fixed. They can only be acknowledged. I set my cup down with deliberate care. I'm not closing the door permanently. But I need accountability, not convenience. I slid a business card across the table. It had the contact information for a family therapist who specialized in estrangement. I'll consider limited contact after you both start therapy. Individual and couples. For at least 6 months. Robert started to object, his face reddening. Charlotte, we don't need therapy. We need you to understand that family helps each other. That's exactly why you need therapy, I said calmly. Because you still don't understand what you did wrong. You still think this is about me being difficult or holding a grudge. You don't see that you destroyed a relationship through decades of neglect and then expected it to be there when you needed something. I stood up, placed a $20 bill on the table to cover their drinks. This is my one condition. It's not negotiable. If you want any kind of relationship with me, you do the work to understand why you don't have one now. Victoria reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Charlotte, please. We need you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw not a mother, but a woman who had made choices for decades, and was now facing their consequences. No, Victoria. You had me. You had a daughter who desperately wanted your approval, your attention, your love. You could have had me at every important moment of my life. But you chose Marcus. You chose convenience. You chose the easy path of favoring the child who demanded nothing and overlooking the one who tried so hard to earn your notice. I pulled out my car keys. What you need now is not me. What you need is to understand that relationships require presence, not DNA. And you were never present. I walked out of the cafe, leaving them at the table with their cold coffee and colder realizations. Through the window, I watched them sit in silence for a moment, before slowly gathering their things and heading toward an aging sedan that had clearly seen better days. The luxury cars they had driven throughout my childhood were gone, sold to cover debts. I got into my Porsche and called Daniel. It's done. I told them exactly what I needed to say. How do you feel? He asked. I started the engine, feeling its power rumble through the chassis. Like I'm driving toward something instead of running away from something. For the first time in my life, I'm not trying to earn anyone's approval. I'm just living. Good, he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. That's exactly what you should be doing. 1 year later, I stood in the offices of the Eleanor Albright Media Foundation, watching Lena present her documentary film to a room full of donors and industry professionals. The space was beautiful, all glass and light, with framed photos of scholarship recipients lining the walls. Each photo showed a young woman at the moment she learned she had received the grant, their faces reflecting the same mixture of shock and joy and relief that I imagined had been on my face the first time someone truly believed in me. Daniel stood beside me, his hand warm on my lower back. Eleanor was on my other side, her aged face serene and proud. Together, we had built something that would outlast all of us, something that mattered more than blood ties or family names. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Robert and Victoria had finally sold the family house, using the money to pay off debts and move into a small apartment in a less expensive town. Marcus had taken a regular job for the first time in years, working as a middle manager at a regional insurance company. The article noted the irony of a family that had once looked down on regular employment, now relying on it for survival. I closed the notification without comment. Lena finished her presentation to enthusiastic applause. She caught my eye across the room and mouthed, "Thank you." I nodded back, feeling that familiar warmth spread through my chest. Later that evening, at a press conference announcing the foundation's expansion, I stood at a podium with Eleanor and Lena flanking me. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward with their recorders. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The public declaration of everything I had built in spite of the people who should have supported me. Family isn't who raised you, I said, my voice clear and strong. Family is who believes in you, who sees you, who shows up. And this foundation is about building that kind of family. One person at a time. We're creating a network of support for women who have been told they're not enough, who have been overlooked, who have been dismissed. We're saying, you are seen, you are valued, and you are worth investing in. The applause was deafening. I announced a new mentorship program, one where Daniel and I would personally work with young entrepreneurs, guiding them through the challenges of building a business from nothing. I announced partnerships with 3 major tech companies who wanted to support our mission. I announced an endowment that would ensure the foundation continued long after I was gone. And through it all, my phone remained silent. No calls from Victoria, no texts from Marcus. No demands, no guilt trips, no sudden interest in my success. Just silence, clean and complete. That night, I drove through Portland in the Porsche, the city lights blurring past my windows. I passed by a familiar coffee shop, the one near my old neighborhood, and through the window I caught a glimpse of 2 figures sitting in a corner booth. Robert and Victoria, looking small and tired, drinking regular coffee instead of the elaborate lattes they had once favored. Our eyes met for a split second through the glass. I did not stop. I did not slow down. I felt no triumph, no vindication, no satisfaction in their reduced circumstances. I felt only a calm, peaceful acknowledgement of reality. They had made their choices. I had made mine. And we were all living with the consequences. I pressed the accelerator, and the Porsche surged forward, carrying me away from the past and toward the future. In my mind, Daniel's words echoed. You're driving towards something, not away from someone. I smiled, my eyes on the horizon, where my real family was waiting. Daniel at home with dinner in the oven. Sophia probably on her way over with wine and gossip. Lena and the other scholarship recipients who had started meeting weekly, forming their own support network. Eleanor, who had become more of a mother to me than Victoria ever was. I called Daniel, putting him on speaker as I navigated the familiar streets. Hey love. I'm heading home. Can we talk about the foundation expansion plans? Always, he said. I'll open the good wine. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. Make it the really good wine. We're celebrating. What are we celebrating? Freedom, I said simply. Choice. The fact that I built a life that matters, with people who actually show up. That's worth celebrating. That's worth everything, he agreed. I drove on into the night, leaving the coffee shop and its sad occupants in my rearview mirror. The Porsche hummed beneath me, powerful and responsive, taking me exactly where I wanted to go. And for the first time in my entire life, I knew with absolute certainty that I was enough, exactly as I was, surrounded by people who had always known it. The empty chairs at my wedding had been filled long ago, not with the people I had wished for, but with the people who had chosen to be there. And that made all the difference.